Chapter 28. Noah sat on the couch in Steph's apartment, waiting to be allowed to take her back to his place. She was curled against his chest, dozing off. He knew without looking it was close to 3 in the morning. Some people called midnight the witching hour. He wasn't sure why, but it was 3 to 4 a.m. he hated. It was the hardest time to stay awake if he wasn't busy, and when he was at work, all the weirdest shit came in around that time. A couple of weeks ago, he'd had to deal with a man who insisted that God was talking to him through stop signs, telling him to kill people. That was only the most recent of many. A knock sounded on the apartment door. Noah started to get up to answer it, but Keith came in from another room. "That's the crime scene unit." Keith went to the door and opened it. Instead of techs to collect evidence, there were 2 people, a man and a woman. They both wore dress slacks and jackets. "Officer Burkhart?" "I'm Detective Edderington," the woman said. She stood slightly in front of the man. "This is my partner, Detective Greystone." "I understand you've got a situation?" She gave the door, with the red paint still spelling out horror, a pointed look. "We do." Burkhart invited them in and closed the door before turning back to them. Noah shook Steph awake. She looked up, half asleep, and blinked several times as she looked around. Keith made introductions and Detective Edderington stepped forward. "I'd like to start from the beginning, if you don't mind. May I sit?" She motioned to a nearby chair. "Yeah, go ahead." Steph sat up and pulled the blanket a little tighter around her shoulders. They asked a few questions about Steph and who exactly Noah was and how he'd gotten involved. They also asked why they'd called Keith instead of reporting the crime through normal channels. "Start from the beginning and tell me what's been happening," Edderington said. Greystone stood nearby watching. Steph told the story again, starting with her date with Eric. After 10 minutes or so, Noah cleared his throat. "You have something to add?" "No, just the opposite actually. You don't need me for this. I'd like to use the restroom, and I'm dying for some caffeine. I'd like to run down to the Quick Mart and get something to drink, if that's all right." "Go ahead," Edderington said, then looked back to her partner. "Why don't you run him down to the store when he's done in the restroom?" Greystone nodded and watched as Noah went into the bathroom. When Noah came out of the bathroom, he found Greystone waiting for him, and they headed for the door. He stopped before leaving and watched Steph until she looked at him, as if silently asking what she wanted. "Rockstar?" Noah said. "Please." Noah gave her a nod, then turned for the door. "Ready?" he asked Greystone. "Whenever you are." Noah opened the door and held it for the detective before stepping out himself and pulling the door closed behind him. "You want to drive, or can I?" Noah asked as they descended the stairs. "You can drive if you'd like." The detective waited at the base of the stairs. Noah had no doubt they were going to question Steph and him separately. This made a good opportunity for that. "I'm the Ford pickup." Noah headed toward his truck and headed that way while digging the key from his pocket. "How long have you known Ms. Roberts?" Greystone asked once they were in the truck. Noah frowned as he tried to remember exactly how long since that day, in the parking area next to the lake. "A little over a week." "Have you had any indication she might be doing these things herself?" "No. Aside from the fact that the fear on her face was real, it's what made me speak to her. I would have caught it if she was faking this. I have a pretty good bullshit meter. Besides, I've met the little bastard." "You've met him?" Greystone's brows arched. "How did that happen?" "He was hanging around my truck one afternoon at the lake." Noah pulled the truck in at the convenience store and put it in park. "Can I run in before we continue?" "Sure." They both went inside and to Noah's surprise, Greystone made 2 coffees. Noah fixed his own drink, then pulled a pair of the Rockstars Steph preferred from the cooler. 2, huh? Greystone nodded toward Noah's purchase as they approached the register. Yeah. It's been a rough night, and she's had about 6.5 hours sleep in the last 48. This might get her through until I can take her back to my place for some sleep. They paid for their drinks and went back out to the truck. You said you'd met this guy, Greystone prompted once they were in the truck. I did. Noah told the detective about his encounter with Eric. He was almost done filling him in when he pulled into the apartment complex lot and parked. They sat in the truck while Greystone asked a few questions, then they went back up to Steph's apartment. Noah opened the door and found Steph still sitting on the sofa with the blanket pulled tight around her. It looked like neither she nor Detective Etherington had moved since he had left. He joined Steph, pulled one can from the bag, popped the top, and handed it to her. Thanks. She took a long drink, then held the can in one hand, while the other still clutched the blanket at her chest, while she continued answering Etherington's questions. Noah settled back on the sofa and sipped his coffee while he waited. It was going to be a while before they could go. After several minutes, Steph set her empty can on the table in front of the sofa, then slid back on the couch and settled up against him. She never looked at him as she continued to talk to the detective. It was almost 7 when the police finally let them go. Noah felt like it had been a longer night than his first night back from the lake. His feet were less tired, but the rest of him ached. It had to be worse for Steph. She wasn't used to being up all night, and this was her second one in a row. Then there was the emotional toll. Noah knew that wasn't slight, and was likely even more than her physical exhaustion. He drove them the short distance to his place and let them in. Come on. He led her to the kitchen. Food first, then bed. I'm not really hungry. She blinked and looked lost. I know, but trust me on this. Noah steered her to a bar stool on the far side of the bar, then went into the work area. Eggs good for you? He went to the sink and washed his hands. Sure. What kind? Scrambled fried omelet? Scrambled sounds good. She leaned forward and propped her chin in her hands. You like anything in them? What do you have? Noah went to the fridge and looked inside. I have a little ham, bacon, cheese, onion, green onion, bell pepper. He turned and looked at her. I have some canned mushrooms too. Steph frowned. Mushrooms? In eggs, that's weird. Noah was glad to see it. It was more of a reaction than he'd seen from her in hours. Ham or bacon would be good. And cheese if it's not feta. I don't like feta. How about blue cheese? Noah couldn't resist asking. Steph scrunched up her face. Ew. That stuff's nasty. What kind of cheese do you have? Just that stuff? No. I don't have it, just wanted to see if you liked it. I don't care for it either. I've got mild cheddar. Oh good. She relaxed and wiggled in her chair, as if she was trying to get comfortable. I like cheddar. But that was mean. It made you wonder though, didn't it? It made me cringe. Noah pulled food from the fridge and put it on the counter before pulling out dishes. After we eat, we can get some sleep. You can have my bed. I'll take the couch. Steph frowned. Why? Why what? He cracked eggs into a bowl. Why will you take the couch instead of the bed with me? I didn't want to assume. You've had a long day, well night. I don't want to be something else you need to worry about. You were put out of your apartment without notice. I offered you a place to stay, that doesn't mean sleeping with me is a condition of that. He continued cooking while he talked. She watched him a moment, a deep crease between her eyes. I've spent most of the last 24 hours with you, a good chunk of that was naked. I was already planning to stay here, and in your bed, before we went over there. No couch. Noah glanced her way, then turned his attention back to the eggs in the pan in front of him. If that's what you want, I'm happy to comply. You've got a lot on your plate, and I didn't want to add to it. The crease on her forehead eased but didn't disappear. No. I'll sleep better if I'm not alone. All right. He dished the eggs out on the 2 plates he'd gotten out, and gave one to Steph before taking the other, and sitting beside her at the bar. Eat up. He waited until she took her first bite, then ate himself. After they finished, Noah took care of the dishes while Steph sat at the bar and watched. He started the dishwasher and turned to find her yawning. You ready to get some sleep? Way past. She stood and joined him as he stopped next to the light switch. She moved up next to him, wrapped one arm around him, and let her head rest against his chest. He wrapped his arm around her and walked her to the bedroom. Shit, he said as he switched on the bedroom light and saw the bed missing the bedding. He'd forgotten that he stripped off the sheets to wash them. Give me a second, I'll get clean sheets and make it up. What about the ones you took off? Did you dry them? No, they're still in the washer. Don't worry though, I have another set. You get started here then, I'll go move the sheets so they don't sour. She released him and disappeared down the hall. He watched her go, then got the sheets from the closet and got started. He was about halfway done when Steph came back. He tried to get her to let him do it, but she insisted on taking one side and helping. Noah had to admit, the job was much faster with 2, and 10 minutes after she came back, they were lying between the sheets. Noah lay on his back with Steph curled against his side, one arm wrapped around her. His chest ached for what she was going through. He wished there was some way he could make it go away for her, make her not have to deal with it all, but he knew she wouldn't want it. Her words about what she was looking for echoed in his mind. Not someone to take care of her. Not someone to own her. She was looking for a partner. It wasn't in his nature to stand by and let someone struggle through on their own, but it was what she wanted. All he could do was be here for her.